Good evening and welcome to Conversations with Crumb. And today you get to see the face behind the voice, our Hilton Parma village historian, Mr. Dave Crumb.
Well,
Dave, it's great to see you on camera, and I'm glad that our viewers and listeners now get to hear you as well. Tonight, he is going to be bringing us a presentation on the Titanic and its local ties to the village of Hilton. Dave, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Mike. Good to be here tonight. Thanks for inviting me. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Titanic, which was the great ship that sunk back in 1912, roughly 111 years ago, I guess. Um, I'm going to go back into my early days, back into the 40s and 50s, and I didn't really hear much about the Titanic back in those days. Not until I went to camp, and they had a song that they used to sing in Boy Scout camp or Camp Corey. I've forgotten where it was, but it kind of came back to me as we were thinking about doing this program tonight. And I happened to find it on YouTube, and I thought, why not play it? Because it kind of sets the atmosphere about what happened. And it's not, I could not articulate everything that they do in the song. So if you'll bear with me just a minute, I'm going to pull it up on YouTube and we'll listen to it.
Yeah, take your time.
Oh, they built the ship Titanic to sail the ocean blue, and they thought they had a ship that the water would never go through. It was on the maiden trip when an iceberg hit that ship. It was sad when that great ship went down. It was sad, it was sad, it was sad, mighty sad. It was sad when that great ship went down. Husbands and wives, little children lost their lives. It was sad when that great ship went down. Oh, she was far from England and approaching to the shore when the rich refused to associate with the poor. So they put them down below where they were first to go. It was sad when that great ship went down. As the humble closed their eyes in the darkness of the hold, the rich upstairs were playing cards to gold. And they laughed when a sailor said, "There's an iceberg close ahead." It was sad when that great ship went down. It was sad, it was sad, it was sad, mighty sad. It was sad when that great ship went down. Husbands and wives, little children lost their lives. It was sad when that great ship went down. When the captain heard the news from a sailor on the mast, he said, "Steady, boys, we'd better not go too fast." But the company in their greed said we must increase the speed. It was sad when that great ship went down. That ship was full of trouble and the sides about to burst, when a man on board said, "Women and children first." It was a night none would forget, even millionaires got wet. It was sad when that great ship went down. It was sad, it was sad, it was sad, mighty sad. and wise little children lost their lives. It was sad when that great ship went down. Oh, the moral of this story, as I'm about to tell, is that you should treat your brothers really well. For in the good Lord's eyes, you're the same as other guys. It was sad when that great ship went down.
Well, Dave, that
Well,
really is a great.
indeed sad. Pardon?
I can say that it is a great way to, I think, set the tone for what we're
Yes.
going to do. And I really like the moral at the end, and that sad, sad, sad thing that is mentioned throughout the song, where I think the people of today that see the movie think of it as tragedy and tragic, but the way that song is sung, it talks about, wives and children and losing their lives.
And
And
being right there. Yeah. It's a ballad. And oftentimes, when you put a story to music, it kind of stays with you.
mhm,
And that's kind of course, the gentleman that sang the song did a much better job than we did in camp. I can't even begin to remember the words other than it was sad. And indeed, it was sad. When you think back and read the full story of what did happen and when it should not have happened, it was a total fiasco. The captain was going too fast. He didn't pay attention. But anyway, we want to get into our Hilton connection. Um, I knew that as a kid that there was somebody in Hilton that had been on a ship that sunk, and that was about it. We didn't really uh, think too much about it as kids. But as time went along, um, I began to think more about it. And then in 1997, the movie Titanic came out, and that was with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. And it was a big hit. All Things Titanic came to the surface 85 years later. Um, and then I had a phone call from an elderly cousin in Springfield, Massachusetts. And she was interested in the Titanic because the Titanic Society was located there, which I didn't know at the time. And she said, who is the lady that was from Hilton that was a Titanic survivor? And so I did a little digging around, and I found out that it was a lady named May Howard. And she made her home with the Kenyons and the Dykmans on Smith Street, just off of East Avenue in Hilton, between the early 1900s and the mid 1900s. May had been born in North Walsham, England, in 1885. And being a part of a large family, she went to work at an early age as a domestic servant in England. But then tragedy struck her life, and her fiancé was killed in the Boer War. And at that point, she decided she would leave England and move to America and join some of her relatives over here and hopefully find work as a nanny. May boarded the new luxury ship Titanic at Southampton as a third-class passenger. Her ticket was A2.39186, and it had cost her £8 and 1 shilling, which probably is the equivalent of $150. Her destination was Toronto, where she had hoped to find work as a nanny, and the trip was uneventful until the ship struck the Great Iceberg. And May described how the ship rocked with the collision and then followed by the ringing of many bells. The doctor came up and told them all was well, but get your life belts on, just in case. When it came time to evacuate the sinking ship, she left in Collapsible C, which is one of the lifeboats, with her friend and companion, Mrs. Emily Goldsmith, and her son Frankie. Sadly, Mr. Goldsmith, like many of the men, went down with the ship. May later related in an early interview, one of the ship's officers grabbed Mrs. Goldsmith and myself and pushed us up to the edge of the ship where the lifeboat was being filled with women and children. An officer there shouted, "All men back, women come first." Getting up from her stateroom, May had a terrible time. She got up a stairway and the crowd pushed her back and she fell down the stairs, but finally got back up to the point where she got up to the edge. And she was on the last lifeboat with Mrs. Goldsmith and Frankie. After her arrival on the Carpathia was the ship that picked up the survivors in the lifeboats. She sent the following telegram to her family from New York after disembarking. "Arrive safe and will write later." That's all she wrote in the telegram. How May got to Hilton is another story. Her original intention was to go to Toronto and join a sister there. First, she had to recover from post-traumatic syndrome and badly frozen feet from being in the lifeboat. The lifeboat was, the water was freezing temperatures, the iceberg was nearby, and the boat was full of water. And obviously she didn't have boots or anything, and so her feet got terribly frozen, which left her with a disability later on in life. She, instead of going to Toronto, had another sister in Albion, New York, a Mrs. Hewitt, and she went to Albion, and there she had time to recover, and when she did feel better, she found that her sister found her work, and the work was as a domestic servant in the home of Sheriff William Kenyon, helping with household chores. And she was trained in this manner and felt comfortable doing that. Many people had people help them in their homes and as paid employees. This would have been probably around 1917 or 18. And at that time in Hilton, Sheriff William Kenyon's brother, Reverend Randall Kenyon, lived. He was the minister for Hilton's First Baptist Church, but he was also suffering from an illness he had picked up during his service in World War I out in Minnesota. And it came and went, and I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it was to the point where a lot of responsibility fell on the shoulders of Mrs. Kenyon and her 5 young children. So she needed help. She called up her brother-in-law and told him the predicament, and he sent May up to the rescue. Ironically, she spent the rest of her life with the Kenyon and Dykeman families on Smith Street in Hilton, New York. May did not like any mention of the Titanic. She had post-trauma. It came and went in her life. The Titanic was a bad memory for her. She saw people drowning. She heard their screams. She said she could hear the band playing at the end as the ship went down, and they were playing "Nearer, My God, to Thee." And then she heard the screams of the people that were going down with the ship. You can only imagine how this would affect a young woman. The Kenyons were always mindful of this situation with May, and they counseled the local community as well as their family to respect her privacy. That's why we never heard much about it, never mentioned. It may have been mentioned in private circles, but there was nothing talked about, as I remember, other than whispers, I guess you might say. The Titanic Society was located in Springfield, Massachusetts, and as the years went by, it gained more members. I believe uh, some of the survivors were members, people interested in the Titanic, and May, I don't believe, was. But in 2012, uh, that was the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the big ship, and I had enough information to know that I should write a story about that, about our Hilton survivor, May Howard. And so I asked around, I looked in files, did what research I could, but then I had the opportunity to call Susan Dykeman Harrison. And Susan grew up in the Dykeman family and was one of the children that May helped take care of. And Susan was willing to talk to me about it, and she verified the things I just mentioned, that it was very private, that May had difficulty walking. She probably had neuropathy in her feet, and it was difficult for her. She had uh, her rooms were on the third floor of the Dykeman home down on Smith Street. She had very nice accommodations, and she would make sandwiches for the children at lunch. She would play board games with them. They loved her. She was like an aunt or a grandmother, and she'd been there for two generations of the family, just part of the family at this point. Um, there today are Titanic museums. There are about five of them. One in Belfast, Ireland, one in Branson, Missouri, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, Cove, Ireland, and the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas has a big one, the Maritime Museum in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm not sure where the sixth one is, but there's a great deal of interest today in this whole event. And we have a connection in Hilton, so we're part of it. There were 2,200 passengers on the Titanic, according to what I found on the internet. 1,500 of them perished. 706 survived, and May was one of them. But because of her wish for privacy, not too much was ever mentioned. I don't even think she was on the Titanic records. We had a Titanic speaker come to the Methodist Church, somewhere around 2013, and we told him about May, and he had never heard of her. There were several in Rochester. We talked about May's damage to her feet, her disability in walking. She did not like to take tub baths. She hated water. She'd take only sponge baths. Um, When she visited her brother's home in Cuckville, New York, down on Lake Ontario, she sat with her back to the water all day long. All the Kenyon children and Dykeman children had fond memories of May, and she became a surrogate member of the family. Different people my age and a little bit older can remember May as kind of a shadowy figure in the community, walking on Main Street. If they'd be visiting the Dykemans, she would be in the background, but never joined in the general conversations. And they were very interested in the article when we put it together because it kind of dignified May in later times. They all respected her wish for privacy and no questions about the Titanic in the early years in Hilton. But certainly after the movie, she needs to take her place in Hilton history, and she has. And when we go on walking tours of the village, we always point out the Dykeman house where May Howard lived, our Titanic survivor. Thank you.
Well, Dave, that truly is a fascinating story, which I know our viewers and listeners are going to enjoy. I would just, as listening to you, I reflected on a couple things, and just the fact that when the ship went down, and she sent a telegram, and all it said was, "Arrived safe. We'll write later." And you fast forward to today, where everything is instantaneous, and I was just trying to think about what that must have been like for her family.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not sure how quickly the news got out, but it got out, and they were probably pretty worried and probably very relieved and thankful that she was among the survivors because so many people weren't. There's so much more that could be said about this whole story. John Jacob Astor was on that ship, and he was one of the wealthiest men in America at the time. And he did not get on a ship, and he went down with the ship. He was a gentleman, and he would not, because of his status, get in a ship. I thought that was pretty remarkable.
And it is, and the fact that you were able to bring that local connection to us tonight with such detail that I really appreciate it because I think sometimes the Titanic is almost like mystified, like did this really happen? And you see the big movie in Titanic, and you do see part of the story and everything, but when you hear firsthand accounts, well, actually secondhand where you're getting it, it really, I think it means a much more great deal.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mike. It was a pleasure. Enjoyed being here.
Well, thank you very much. So I enjoyed it too. So this has been Conversations with Crumb with Mr. Dave Crumb, and we'll come up with more in the near future. Have a good night.
Night.